Good morning for 2 more minutes. I was timing that out, not certain whether I would be at 12:03 or 2 minutes to 12. All right. So here we are, Judaism in 10 minutes. So I'm going to talk really fast. No, I'm not going to talk really fast, but I will try to. There will obviously be things I will leave out and things that I will emphasize this morning. Jewish tradition states that we kind of roll our tradition over and over. It said there's a saying in the Mishnah, the rabbinic sayings, that says hafoch ba v'hafoch ba ki kula ba. We turn it and we turn it because everything is in it. And so we're constantly in that search for understanding and to expand our understanding of the Jewish tradition. Imagine a stool with 3 legs. And I'm not sure that any of you have ever seen a stool that stands on 2 legs or 1 leg. So what I'm suggesting here is that each leg of the stool supports it. No one leg is stronger. And so as I form my thoughts today, I'm looking at the 3 legs of Jewish life: God, Torah, and Israel. And I'll give you an opportunity to hear my perspective on each of these. There is no hierarchy. Each plays its role of equal importance. First, God. In traditional Jewish thought, God is an assumption. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is one. The Creator, the omnipresent, the omnipotent, the one who is close to us and beyond our understanding. Over time, really after the 19th century, we began to expand our understandings of God and Jewish theology. And don't worry, I'm not going into a deep dive into theology this morning, but just to give you an idea. So there have been others who have argued that perhaps God is a God of nature, a naturalist view of Jewish God understanding. There are existentialists that God is found in relationships with other people, courtesy of Martin Buber. And then in our own time, after the events of World War II and the Holocaust, is there a God at all who could not hear and could not or did not respond? So what I want to focus on today with regard to God is God in prayer. Prior to the year 70, there was no prayer as we understand it today within the Jewish faith. It was a system of sacrifices, which we refer to as the sacrificial cult, priests doing the work for the people. And that ended in the year 70 with the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem by the Romans. And so that was it in terms of that style of worship. The word for sacrifice in Hebrew is karban. And although the idea of animal or grain sacrifice is foreign to us today, at least within the Western religious traditions, we did have it, and we discarded it when there was no place still to do it. And we replaced it with blessings, a formula for expressing thanks, and also making requests of God. Each has a role, and I should point out that requests in the Jewish tradition, God, please give me this, please give me the knowledge to get an A on this test, those requests we refrain from on the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is God's day of rest. Prayer is an everyday occurrence. There are 3 set times for prayer: morning, afternoon, and evening. And set prayers and spontaneous prayers are part of the Jewish prayer vocabulary. The second leg on the stool, Torah, often understood as law, but here we understand it as teaching or study. In a week, we'll be celebrating the holiday of Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, which marks 7 weeks after the holiday of Passover, which in biblical understanding was the time it took us to leave Egypt and arrive at the foot of Mount Sinai. And so there's, at Mount Sinai, there were, all of us say that there were 10 commandments, or as Jews say, 10 utterances from God. But Jews understand also that at that time we received 613 mitzvot, 613 sacred obligations. And from that, we expanded this to include both a written Torah, that is the 5 books of Moses, and an oral Torah, which the rabbis wrote down and which we have until this day. An example of the oral Torah in one of the pictures from the Western Wall, there's a man standing against the wall with black leather straps around his arms. And this is an interpretation, after the Bible, from the section in Deuteronomy which says, "You shall bind it for a sign upon your hand, and it shall be frontlets between your eyes." And so this becomes an interpretation of that biblical saying. The important thing about Torah is mitzvah, the idea of sacred obligation. And there are 2 kinds of these sacred obligations, one between humans and God, and one between humans and other humans. Both are important. Both form a central purpose to our lives. An example of those between God and us would be, for example, Jews have a tradition of a special dietary code, which is enumerated in Shmini, your Torah portion, Lance, and it gives us an understanding of what we should do and what God expects of us. And then there are the virtues of aiding the stranger, feeding the hungry, healing the sick, displaying kindness, which culminated in the phrase, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself, in Leviticus 19. So these commandments become the centerpiece of Jewish living. And finally, the third leg, Israel. Not the modern state, but the peoplehood of Israel. Israel, of course, was the name given by God to Jacob after his struggle with the angel. And we understand Yisrael, the Hebrew word, to mean struggling with God. Peoplehood is central to Jews. Jews have different levels of religiosity and observance, but we are all part of the Jewish people. Whether we live in the United States or Israel or France or India or Australia or South Africa. Peoplehood keeps us together. We say, Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh, all of Israel is involved with one another. That doesn't mean we always agree with one another. There's a standing joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And so we argue with one another. We struggle with one another even as we struggle with our understanding of God and what God expects of us. But peoplehood matters. And when a bomb goes off at a Jewish community center in Argentina, Jews in America and Jews in Israel and Jews throughout the world reach out to that community with funds and a way to provide grief counselors, etc. It was an amazing response. When, unfortunately, in our own country, Jews are gunned down in Pittsburgh and San Diego County, every Jew feels it. And the Prime Minister of Israel feels the obligation to send a representative from his government to offer condolences. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. Peoplehood is memory. Memory, perhaps, in Jewish life is more important than history. And when the Torah was given, it was given to all generations of the Jewish people. There's a small joke told that a man was traveling on a train and he saw another who seemed to look familiar. And he, after a few minutes, a little bit shyness, he said, do I know you from Houston, perhaps? The man looked at him and said, I don't believe so. And he said, maybe we met in New York once. I went to school there. He said, I don't think so. Man shook his head and said, we met at Mount Sinai. I remember. So the experience, the Jewish experience, is not just something that is shared in any generation, but we say from generation to generation. God, Torah, and Israel. We balance these concepts, and we balance them in order to create a life of holiness. Thank you.
Good morning. Many of you may know that I'm Jewish. It's not something that I talk about or spend a great deal of time. In consciousness, it's among the most important essences of who I am. It has never left me. It has always been something that is exceedingly strong within me, and it informs a great deal of my thinking and how I am in the world. So I'd like to spend just a bit of time talking about that part of my journey and how I got from, as a 5 or 6-year-old, sitting next to my grandfather on a bench in a synagogue in Brooklyn, New York, listening to him and the congregation pray. It was a small synagogue. He was the contractor who built it. So it truly was his house of worship. When he retired, he prayed 3 times a day. Dr. Rabin talked about that. And by the way, thank you, Harvey. Thank you so much. My parents were first-generation Americans in our family. Both sides of my family came from Europe. I was born in 1947. In 1948, the State of Israel was established. The Holocaust was near and it was real in my life. So Judaism was an exceedingly important part of who I was and who I was to become. At 13, I was bar mitzvahed. And Reverend Kristen, I was going to say Reverend Kristen was there. She was not there. I was bar mitzvahed 59 years ago. And several weeks ago, I gave a talk at the 8 a.m. service on Moses and Jesus, the Beatitudes and the 10 Commandments, and love and law. And I was moved at that point in time to recite the first 4 lines of my Torah reading from the day of my bar mitzvah. Right out of nowhere, out of memory, it came. And at the age of 13, sports and girls and other pursuits, and the fact that I was now done in terms of Hebrew school, which I had gone to from the time I was like 7 till 13, and I could then join my playmates, some of whom were not raised in the Orthodox tradition that I was. And I drifted away from formal study of Judaism. I never drifted away from being a Jew. Can't do it. You can't take it on, put it on and off like a cloak or like a suit. It's who you are and who I have always been. The State of Israel had a tremendous importance to me. There were people in my family who had tattoos on their arms, who managed to escape from the Nazis. And then all of a sudden, the exigencies of family, etc., the fact that I actually married 3 non-Jews, and so I wasn't being pushed in any direction. And all of a sudden, as I said, I stopped being observant. And then, as some of you know, several years ago, now it's about 8 years ago, Jean and I picked up and moved to Los Angeles, California to study at the Agape International Spiritual Center. Both of us are Agape practitioners and religious science practitioners. And I discovered a writer, an Orthodox Jew, and a mystic, and he just really touched me and appealed to me. That would be Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, a Jewish mystic. I'm going to take a few moments and just read a few things from here. And I would also like to close then with just a little bit of reading from Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. From Heschel, light. God is not a hypothesis derived from logical assumptions, but an immediate insight, self-evident as light. He is not something to be sought in the darkness with the light of reason. He is the light. Once again on God. The issue of prayer is not prayer. The issue of prayer is God. And finally, on the Sabbath. The seventh day is the armistice in man's cruel struggle for existence, a truce in all conflicts, personal and social, peace between man and man, man and nature, peace within man, a day on which handling money is considered a desecration, imagine, on which man avows his independence of that which is the world's chief idol. The seventh day is the exodus from tension, the liberation of man from his own muddiness, the installation of man as a sovereign in the world of time. And finally, from Viktor Frankl, who spent a number of years in a concentration camp as a psychiatrist, but nonetheless. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstance, to choose one's own way. And he goes on to say, love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of his personality. No one can become fully aware of the very essence of another human being unless he loves him. By his love, he is enabled to see the essential traits and features in the beloved person, and even more, he sees that which is potential in him, which has not yet been actualized, but yet ought to be actualized. Furthermore, by his love, the loving person enables the beloved person to actualize their potentialities by making him aware of what he can be and what he should become. He makes these potentialities come true.
Thanks for joining us today. And if you like the message, we invite you to like it, share it, and please subscribe.
We are a New Thought church where lives are transformed. So come on, check us out at unityhills.org.
Namaste.